Well, sometimes snow showers from the Great Lakes make it to eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England. A few places had some heavier snow squalls go by late this afternoon and this evening, but now they're history. And we wait for a strong cold front that's going to fire up the lake effect machine again and also bring accumulating snows to some interior areas across the Northeast. And we'll talk about that and see where all this is taking us for the end of the week and into the weekend. That's right now on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. And you could support the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast by shopping on the referral link that we have pinned to the chat board or on the descriptor to this video to Amazon. It's very simple. Just go in there, search for whatever you're looking for. You make a purchase. Amazon gets you your stuff. And they also throw us back a little bit of coin for sending you there, and it doesn't cost you a dime. So we appreciate you supporting the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast by shopping on Amazon. So that was a little bit of a surprise today, Mr. Rayo, with the snow showers that occurred.
Yeah, they passed through my neck of the woods around 3 or 4 o'clock this afternoon, but then just as quickly they moved out. The skies cleared, and I was just out with the dog, and the skies are mostly clear out there right now. That's probably what we're going to be looking at for tonight. Then we'll see the clouds increase again tomorrow. Don't think I will see any precipitation during the daytime hours, but once we go under the cover of darkness tomorrow night, I expect that we'll be seeing wet snow and or rain. I think south of 287 here in the lower Hudson Valley, it'll be kind of a mix of rain and wet snow. North of 287, I think it's going to be flat out all snow. And I'm kind of surprised, Joe. A lot of the local forecasts for the Hudson Valley, at least, are saying little or no accumulation. And I got to tell you something. With those snow showers that we had this afternoon, there were some parts of my driveway that had little, patches of white because the snow was able to accumulate quite readily in parts of my driveway even on the blacktop. And I'm saying to myself, tomorrow night we may get upwards to maybe 1 or 2 tenths of an inch of precipitation. Not a whole heck of a lot, but it's been so very cold of late. It will be cold again tomorrow. Why not go for some kind of an accumulation? I'm saying that places south of 287 might get just a slush coating to maybe an inch, but north of 287, that includes where I am, 1, maybe even 2 inches of snow. I see that as an option. It's going to be dependent upon, and I've been hearing also people, been saying it's a clipper. Yeah, it's a
It's a
clipper system,
twister.
but it's
It's a
passing
twister.
north of our area. It's passing north of our area. What we're going to see from this is the cold front that'll pass on through probably right around daybreak on Thursday. Now, depending upon the intensity of the snow, depending upon just how much snow we go through in a relatively short interval of time, I mean, people would be able to wake up. People will be able to wake up on Thursday morning, look out their window, and they might even say, "Hey, my God, it's a blizzard going on." It won't last very long, but it could be enough to whiten the ground, or maybe even put down a quickie inch or two in a few spots. I'm not sure yet, but that's what I would go for, or just to be on the safe side.
It's a solid Arctic front. It's a very strong low that's deepening in southern Canada and moving eastward. Um, yeah, I mean, there's probably going to be, you're going to have some stuff ahead of the front, and then, the upper trough just kind of swings in almost right behind it. Who knows? I mean, there might be, a little line there of, a heavier snow squall line that forms. I wouldn't rule it out. And of course, the big thing about it is that once it does go by, we mentioned this last night, the winds are going to howl on the backside
Right.
Thursday night into Friday, which is going to make the cold air that's coming in even, feel that much colder. By the way, I had snow showers here in North Georgia last night at my house. And, I went out this morning and there were at least because this happened, I was already asleep. It was 10:30 last night. My neighbor told me all about it. He's a snow freak, so he was taking pictures. He said the flakes got really big. I haven't seen it yet to verify whether that is the case or not. But the ground was like speckled, and as I drove out this morning, heading south, I did notice that some areas had a bit of a sugar coating of snow. And then I was driving also late this afternoon through Blood Mountain, and in a lot of it is all shade all day. And there was snow, there was a coating of snow and patch. It was patchy, but there were areas where there was a coating of snow. And some of the mountaintops this morning were all nice and white. So I got some, just to put it that way. Uh,
And
excuse me.
it looks like this cold, this wind that we're going to be seeing, and of course we had a discussion last night about one forecaster locally referring to Thursday into Friday as bitter, and a lot of people were upset about that. They said, well, you shouldn't. Bitter should be reserved for 10 degrees or lower ambient air temperature. But it's all relative. Uh, you have a 35-degree temperature and a 40-mile-an-hour wind, and you're walking into that. What else are you going to call it? Maybe blustery, cold? I don't know, but it's going to be rough to be out and about Thursday into Friday with those winds. I was showing Renata last night, Joe, the zero Z GFS, and I said, look at that gradient that
Yes.
develops behind that cold front tomorrow on Thursday morning, and that means business. That really and truly means business. So it's going to be kind of rough to be out and about Thursday and Friday for any long length of time.
Well, our Tom Contino apparently sent uh, uh, fired off an email to Lee Goldberg about his crime of using the word bitter. And Lee responded, said he used it because people are not acclimated to it yet. I won't disagree with that. It is, it's
Yeah, as
been,
I said, it's
obviously
all
it's been
relative.
cold. Throw in the wind. Yeah, and it's the first one really like this. Yeah, it's gonna feel, it's not gonna feel good. Let's put it that way.
Well, that's absolutely. I mean, like what Lee Goldberg told Tom Contino is what basically was I've been saying, which is it's all relative. I mean, this is going to be a blast, not just so much cold, but in terms of the combination of cold and wind. And like I said, what would you call it? Maybe blustery, but really, if you're going to be out and about Thursday afternoon or Thursday night, you're walking into that wind. Oh, unless you have one of those pullover face masks, in which case people will be looking at you very suspiciously because I'm sure anyone who wears that kind of garment uh, would people would say like, well, what's he doing prowling around the neighborhood with looking like that? But
Right.
I mean, it is going to be it's going to be cold. It is going to be bitter.
Uh, no doubt. No doubt. A couple of, I'm lined up pretty much with you with respect to the accumulation idea. I think when you go south of Route 87, because of the way this front is aligned, and there's no wave that's rippling. Sometimes you get fronts like this, and a little low develops on it, and just sort of ripples along, and you get some snow on the backside. That won't be the case from New York City and northern New Jersey south. But it may very well be the case for, say, interior Connecticut on up into Massachusetts. And that's where we have the first. And let me bring up the map. And while I'm doing that, just want to say a big hello to everybody on the chat board. Welcome to tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. And for those of you who are new or lurking in the background, we welcome you too. We love everybody here. And subscribe to my YouTube channel and make sure your notifications are on because this way you won't miss us. We are out here Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. The occasional Friday and Saturday when there's a storm around. And if you like the show, hit the like button. So we've got some counties in north central New York under winter storm watches. We've got counties in southwestern New York, northwest Pennsylvania, northeastern Ohio under winter storm watches. And yes, these are the same areas that just got clobbered, and they're going to get clobbered to an extent with this next round of lake effect snows. But this time around, it's not going to be going on for 4 days. This is going to go on Wednesday night, Thursday, Thursday night and maybe a little bit early on Friday. So this is going to shut off sooner. So the amounts, while still formidable, will be less. In We also have winter storm watches up for northern Maine, advisories throughout western Maine into Vermont, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts, and we may see a few more advisories go up. Wind advisories for southern Connecticut, Long Island, the Hudson Valley, New Jersey, much of Pennsylvania, except the Northeast, at least for now, because the offices don't always coordinate things. So you see, one office does it now, one is going to wait till tomorrow to do it, but a lot of that's all going to fill in. Around the Great Lakes, winter storm warnings for much of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. We've got, I think those are winter storm watches. Are they winter storm watches? Winter storm watches for the west shores of the lower peninsula of Michigan and part of the upper peninsula of the northern part also. We've got freezing fog and fog out in the west, but not much else. And we've got some freezes that are going to occur uh, almost down into central Florida tonight, southeast Georgia, central Florida, all under freeze warnings. And we can take a look at the satellite loop and you can already see the clouds that are moving out of the northern plains and across the Great Lakes. This is the next developing low. There's not a whole lot happening here for the most part in the east. Actually, if you look really, really close, you can kind of pick out what was that the squall line. It is very, very hard to see, but it is there. It's like a little thin line of clouds that sort of stands out there, some bright white clouds. We've got some clouds down in Texas as moisture's coming in from off the Pacific and into Texas and the Western Gulf. It was a sunny day across the south and from Virginia southward down to Florida, back up through the plains. Much of the West also enjoying some very quiet weather. And as we check out the radar, we can see the last of those echoes now are off the coast, southeastern New England to eastern Long Island. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry, my cold is getting much better, but I'm still just a tad stuffy. And the lake effect has calmed down, but now here comes the next one, and the radar is pretty loaded here, and it's moving southeastward, so that's going to be the weather system for tomorrow. And there's nothing much going on in the west. I want to just say, if I may, and I'm hesitant to say this, but if you're a winter weather lover and you've seen something like the pattern we've been in, um, I I think the odds of a pattern like this showing up again down the road is pretty high. Okay. I don't believe this is going to be just like a one and done, and that we're going to be sitting here in February saying, "Do you remember that 10-day period from Thanksgiving into the first week of December when it got cold? Well, that was the whole winter." I don't think, Joe. Looking at what I've been looking at, how the upper air has been, you know, acting the last week or two. I'm kind of leaning to the idea that this is not going to be just a one-off.
Well, one thing I think we can guarantee is that after this initial shot of very cold air and windy conditions that are coming in for Thursday and for the end of the week, that there will be a bit of a warming trend. And in fact, next week, temperatures will actually be running probably for much, if not all of next week, at or above normal. And we may even see a few days next week where temperatures are going to be well up in the 50s. So if you haven't had a chance yet to put up your outdoor lighting, like one certain individual who is speaking to you right now for the Christmas holidays, don't fret because next week things are going to get a lot better. The temperatures, which are going to be, well, if I may use Mr. Goldberg's term, bitter for Thursday and Friday, it's going to be a lot less harsh out there by the time we get to Monday, and temperatures, as I said, will be on the rise as the upper level winds turn more out of a southwesterly direction, and that'll set the stage again for a stretch of above normal temperatures here. Also, as an upper level ridge of high pressure builds up in the atmosphere over the east, and that will be again happening during the early and middle part of next week.
Speaking of snow amounts, uh, which I know you weren't necessarily speaking of snow amounts, but we were earlier. This is the Weather Service digital forecast, which covers the period right through 7 p.m. So from 7 p.m. tonight to 7 p.m. Friday, the next 72 hours. And you can see it's basically a foot to a foot and a half, maybe a little bit higher, from Northeast Ohio, Northwest Pennsylvania, into southwestern New York. Buffalo's on the edge of this with 6. There is going to be more snow, accumulating snow, in the I-90 corridor from Buffalo to Rochester to Syracuse this time around. And in fact, Syracuse on the digital forecast has 11, and also bigger amounts again in north central New York, including Watertown. So they're going to get, by the time this week is all said and done, there are going to be some areas out here that got between 75 and 100 inches of snow in this 7 day period. Now, here in the east, so the Weather Service has got all this light blue down into Northeast Virginia with no numbers. I would say that that's where there's a possibility that you could see a coating, and that reaches up to about New York City. Does not include Long Island. Does include southern Westchester. They've got some 1 to 2 inch amounts in Northwest Jersey. I don't see why that can't happen. Same for northeastern Pennsylvania. But then you start to see the amounts pick up in Connecticut, particularly in north of Route 84. I think that's probably the place you want to look for, where you could wind up with 2 or 3, and some of that bleeds over to the other side into Dutchess County, maybe even into northern Putnam County here, for some, 2 or 3 inch amounts, as Joe pointed out. Then you get into upstate, further north into Western Mass, we're talking about 5 or 6. You get into Vermont, you're talking about 11 or 12. Same holds for New Hampshire. You've got anywhere from, 3, 4, 5 inches in the south to 10, 11, and 12 up to the north. And up in Maine, we're seeing, generally where we have winter storm watches up for 6 to 12 inch snowfall amounts. And I think that's pretty fair. Also, into the central Appalachians, we're going to see uh, some heavier snows of 6 inches plus down into West Virginia, and maybe even a couple of inches in the mountains of western North Carolina. So that doesn't quite get to me. It cuts off just to my north, but it's close. One of these days, that line will extend further south, and we'll see. And around the Great Lakes, we're looking at some big amounts of over a foot in the western part of the lower peninsula of Michigan, and also in the northern part of the lower peninsula. And of course, the upper peninsula is in a zone of about 12 to 18. So this is a rather robust system that's going to be playing out. WPC, the folks at WPC, the probability for at least 2, the 50% line is kind of right along Route 84 in Connecticut, and then goes a little bit further north up the Hudson Valley, kind of sticks a finger up there, pushing up, picks up again in the Catskills, gets, obviously in the lake effect areas, you're talking about big amounts. And I'll put the probability for at least 12. And you see it's, excuse me, that light blue is 70 to 80% probability in Northwest PA and Southwest New York, and also in parts of North Central New York and in Michigan. Well, I'm sorry, this is on the other side. So on the Canada side of Lake Huron, we've got an area of 80 to 100% probability for at least 12. In Michigan, it's 40 to 50% in the northern part of the lower peninsula, and also in the east eastern part of the upper peninsula. God, it's not easy remembering the geography of Michigan. It really isn't. It's really mind-blowing.
Yeah, and in
Uh,
fact, there's one place in on the Upper Peninsula. I think it's pronounced Ensenada, Michigan,
yes.
and for whatever reason, Ensenada, Ensenada, I believe, in terms of longitude, is further west than Chicago. Chicago is on Central Standard Time. Ensenada, for whatever reason, is on Eastern Time. They must have some pretty weird and wild, you know, being that far to the west and still being on Eastern Time means that for them, they almost don't need a switch to daylight time. The sun sets, for example, probably about an hour later in the Eastern time zone for Ensenada as opposed to, let's say, New York or Boston. It is kind of weird. The geography is kind of weird too. It's you look at Michigan, you always see the lower peninsula. You sometimes forget that that skinny band of land to the north is also Michigan, the so-called Upper Peninsula as well.
And I just changed it to the probability for at least four. And you can see it's all pretty ample here. Upstate, New England, northern New England in particular, and also in northern Michigan, both the northern part of the lower peninsula and the upper peninsula of Michigan. I somehow got through that without too much difficulty. Yeah. All right, precip over the next 7 days. So this obviously covers multiple systems. When you see a half to three quarters from New York City into southern New England, so clearly it's not going to be from the first system. We've got another one coming later in the forecast period. The Ohio Valley, some of this is snow in from northeast Ohio and up into north central New York. But uh, if this goes to next through next Tuesday evening, there might be an event that will bring rain there. And with all that snow, I bet you at this time Sunday, we're going to be looking at flash flood watches up for that area. Big rains across the south and into the southeast. We're seeing inch and a half plus rains punching into western South Carolina, all across the Gulf states, parts of the lower Tennessee Valley, and then a large area of 7 to 10 inches of rain for southeast Texas and southwest Louisiana. So pretty wet uh, pattern setting up there. Not much else, though, as far as precip is concerned. Central Rockies, it's mostly light. Northern Rockies, maybe a little bit more, and maybe a little bit more than that in the Pacific Northwest, mainly for Northern Oregon and Northwest Washington. Otherwise, the West is very, very quiet, especially the Southwest. Hardly anything happening there. So let's look at say I want to look at a couple of snow maps. Since we're inside 48 hours, I don't see it doing any harm. So here's the NAB. Now, for some reason, the 0 and 12Z runs have been painting this, I think, somewhat ridiculous picture of showing 3 inches in New York City, 4 inches in Yonkers, an inch and a half down to Toms River, an inch and a half to Trenton. And then you see these amounts Waterbury 5.8, Hartford 5.9, and an area of 6 inch snows that runs up through central Massachusetts and points northward. Somehow I don't
Now,
think that
question,
that's going to be the case.
the question, if it does verify, will it still be the crazy NAM?
Well, I mean, that's again, I do not like when these models do this because one of these days, the one that puts the crazy numbers is going to wind up being right, or at least closer to being right. Now, it's happened that the 0Z run the 6 and the 12Z run. I'll go back to the 0Z run from last night, which kind of did the same thing. Okay. I mean, had 3 inches in New York City, 3.5 in Yonkers, a little bit less, even still down an inch, 1.2 in Toms River, and 5, 6 inch amounts, central Connecticut northward. Okay. The 6 and 18Z runs, on the other hand, paint what I think is a more reasonable picture, which is allowing for the possibility that there could be a coating or a little bit more in New York City, Western Long Island, maybe, and in New Jersey. But those big amounts are more than cut in half as you go across into Connecticut and Massachusetts. So, I mean, that's the dam. The other thing is, and I was also looking around the SREF, for which we get legumes. Uh, the last couple of SREFs have been pretty close. The snow amounts here, I think if I had to say, if somebody said, of all the models, pick a snow map that you think probably best represents what's going to happen tomorrow. I think the SREF probably comes, excuse me, probably comes the closest, which is for a half an inch in Yonkers. Maybe that's overdone. 3/10 in New York City, mostly coating to maybe under an inch across northern New Jersey and northeastern Pennsylvania. And then you get into those 2 or 3 inch amounts, central Connecticut, northwest Connecticut, and on up into Massachusetts and points northward. So again, if you ask me if I had to pick one of the maps that I think probably has the best idea, I'm going to pick the SREF.
Okay, that certainly is viable. As I said, I think we may very well pick up some sticking snow or significant snow merely on the basis of the fact that we're talking about not a clipper system, where the clipper is going to be moving well north of us, but the associated front, and the front may bring, maybe a couple of snow squalls, and that in its
Mhm.
own right could whiten the ground or even drop a quickie inch or two in a few places. That's something that I think is going to be worth watching for on Thursday morning. I told my son, who is a teacher, I said, you might have a delay, 2 hour delay. And he said, really? I have been listening to the weather forecast and they have been saying that we're not going to see much of anything. I said, well, in my opinion, my humble opinion, the ground is still going to be quite cold. And if you get any kind of snowfall of any significance for even a couple of hours, and especially if it comes down really hard, those roads are going to get slicked up, and you may find yourselves with a problematic commute. So we shall see what happens on Thursday morning. It'll be most interesting. Look out the window, and the last storm that we had, the one that we had just over a week ago, looked out the window. The grass was white, but my driveway, blacktop, no problem, no care in the world if I were going to be doing any traveling. But again, that came off of a series of days when temperatures were in the 50s. Now, again, we've had a number of cold days and especially cold nights, and this snow is going to come in the overnight hours tomorrow night, and it could very well, again, come Thursday morning, look out the window, and that blacktop may not be blacktop. It may very well be white because of the temperatures and the temperature of the ground. So we'll see.
Well, here's the Europeans look, which is also, I think, acceptable, which has about an inch in northwest Jersey, about an inch, inch and a half in the lower Hudson Valley, northern Westchester northward. Picks it up in Connecticut north of Route 84, and you can see the bigger amounts in western and north and central New York, as well as in northwestern Pennsylvania and northeast Ohio. So, I mean, I don't see this really changing very much. And, just looking at what's going on in the upper air, we'll give this a look here. You've got this another one of these troughs. I mean, this has been a series of trough after trough dropping into the eastern part of the United States. And here comes the one for this diving upper low into the Great Lakes, moving across, uh, right along the border of New York State, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Canada, and then winds up in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, just pivots and swings around and goes negative. It's a very vigorous upper trough, and then it's going to pull out, which allows for some ridging to build in the east. And we also have some energy coming into the west over the weekend, and drops down into Texas. And, a short wave is going to try to come out on Monday. And then a stronger system comes out for the middle part of the week. Now, as we go through time, after that pulls out, we get again some ridging here in the east. Uh, Later in the forecast period, it does look like the ridge wants to come back to the west. Now, that may eventually lead to troughing coming back into the eastern part of the U.S. for the last 10 or so days of December. So we may lose that middle part of the month here, but I think it's possible that we could see a colder pattern emerging for the for the latter 10 days. And I just want to take a quick look at the ant shambles, which kind of have there's above normal heights, but it's not crazy. There is some troughing in the east. There's, a bit more ridging, trying to pop up in the west, but there's not a whole lot of amplitude here. So that doesn't really, if you don't have amplitude, you can't really have big storms. But nonetheless, uh, I agree. We're going to warm up. This cold air is going to pull out. We're going to get back to normal, then go above normal. and then we'll watch to see how long it lasts.
Okay, so at least we agree that there will be a bit of a warming trend after this week, and then after that, who's to say? We may indeed go back to a colder pattern, especially if the ridge, builds back in the west and the trough comes back here in the east, and that's something that I'm sure a lot of people would like to see by the Christmas holiday.
Yeah. Here's our storm front system for tomorrow. You see it there in southeast Canada, whipping through a cold front during Wednesday night. Then you get the upper trough. The gradient is very tight. I mean, it really is going to blow here across the Northeast down to the mid-Atlantic states and down through the Appalachians. Gradually, it pulls out. The lake effect dies off as we go into the weekend. High pressure moves off the Carolinas. A bit of a warm front goes by to our north with some snow in Maine and into New Brunswick. Then here comes that Gulf moisture shoots up northeastward for Monday night and Tuesday, and then we have a stronger low that's going to come out and head for the Great Lakes, a couple of them, and that's going to bring some rain here for the middle part of next week. So, look, if we're going to go to a warmer pattern, I would much prefer um, I would much prefer that we get rain events so that we can keep making up the the deficit, the rainfall deficit. We've actually done a fair job of it since the last couple of weeks. So I'd rather it go to a rainy pattern and not go to another that ridiculously warm, endlessly dry pattern that we were in for almost over 2 months.
Absolutely agree. And yeah, it's hard to believe that a week or two ago we had a rainstorm which dumped anywhere from 1.5 to 3 inches of rain. I mean, that's a substantial amount of rain in one sitting, and yet all it was referenced as a drought denter. It put a dent in the drought. It didn't bring a uh, it didn't erase the drought because there's still so much more that we need, and so we could use more of those kind of rain events and snow events too, especially as we get into the middle and latter part of the winter, and then as we move into spring, to get a meltdown and a runoff or whatever of all that moisture. So hopefully this will be past us by late winter or early spring, but we'll have to wait and see and how the patterns develop in the coming days and weeks.
Do you have Briller Jeopardy tonight?
Yes, I do. I
Well,
indeed do have Brother
let's
Jeopardy.
do it quickly. I have to get up tomorrow morning to go
I will
fishing,
do it.
so
Well, yeah, well, that's good.
hold on.
All
Let me
right,
see what the
Scott
temperature
Briller,
is.
Scott Briller, kind enough to provide us with this first December Briller Jeopardy, and on this Briller Jeopardy, here we are asking the average snowfall in the month of December for 5 cities. And we will start with Boston. Average December snowfall in Boston.
I am going to say, since New York City is at round 6, I will say Boston is probably around, I'll say 7.8.
Trying to be a little,
Cute.
precise with your going to the tenth of an inch, but unfortunately, Joe, that's not quite enough.
All right. Well, Chuck Cardillo said 9. Michael McGuire said
And
9.
Frank R. also said 9. And for those two, I'm going to ring the bell because
And
that is,
and Norm Roberts.
and Norm Roberts, 9 inches in the month of December in Boston. Let's try something a little more difficult. Buffalo.
Buffalo. Oh God. I don't know. I wouldn't even begin to know what how to pull a number out of the hat for Buffalo for December. I'll say 18. That number popped into my head. 18.
18, that's a good number, but it's not enough.
Okay. Well, Leon Lindenhurst said 22,
That's closer.
and Frank Darcy said 24.
That's even close. In fact, that puts us in snake territory.
All right. So Tyler Fienga's at 25.
Tyler, There you go.
And so is
25.
Allen at 25, and Scalera is at 25, and
And
McGuire's at 25,
William Huber had
and
120.
Croce's at 25, and Roberts is at 25.
All right, all right. There you go. How about Chicago?
Chicago
Yes,
for December.
right.
Well, Chicago's like 10 inches more than New York on average. Is 6 months. I'll say 8.5.
Joe, you had to stick in the half.
All right, but round it off.
All right. Well, round it down or round it up?
Um, I'll say round it up.
Eh.
Should have rounded down.
Should have
That
rounded
means
down.
Frank R at 8 got it.
And Chuck Cardillo too with
And
8.
Vincent Croce, and Birder Lady, and
And
Patrick Darcy, and a partridge in a pear tree. Next,
now the best place in the nation. CLEVELAND, Cleveland.
Cleveland. What was Buffalo?
25.
25. I'm going to go a little lower for Cleveland. So I think their annual snowfall, if I remember, is something like 60. So I'll say 17.
Should have gone a little lower than that, Joe.
Okay.
Chuck Cardillo says 8. Latex Dream 17. 20, according to Ruben Fairchild.
Frank Scalera at 14.
14 for Frank Scalera. That's a little closer.
Frank R at 11.
13 is Michael McGuire, 13. Who said 11?
Frank R
Frank R. Well, somewhere between Michael McGuire's 13 and Frank R's 11 is the
is
correct.
Leon Lindenhurst with 12.
And 12. There you go. Leon, for
Give
you.
Leon a bell ring.
Doing it just now.
And
How about
finally,
Hartford?
Hartford. What was Boston?
9.
9.
Yes.
New York is 6. Hartford. I'll say 8 for Hartford.
Snake country for you, Joe.
Okay. Chuck Cardillo said
Arkansas is
7,
also
and Adam Lowe said 9.
Adam Lowe. This
Tyler
is
Fengick said 9.
same as
Latex
Boston.
Dreams said 9. Frank R said 9. So it's 9.
There you go. Bonus. Bonus. Caribou.
Oh, stop with Caribou. Enough. Enough. I don't know. 25.
Very close. That's
Caribou and Denver, the two places that I should just go in there and read up on both of them because they're going to get thrown at me, and I never get them right. Um, Frank Scalera is at 23. Apollo 9's at 26.
well, who said 23?
Frank Scalera and Adam
Frank.
Lowe.
Frank and Adam. Get the bell. 23 for both of you.
Mr. Ruben Fairchild wants to know why the fire in my fireplace isn't moving. I don't know what kind of computer you have or what kind of problems you're having with your live stream, Mr. Ruben Fairchild, but my fireplace is certainly the flames are moving. Joe, aren't the flames moving on my fireplace? Don't you see them moving?
Whatever you
Don't
say.
you see them moving?
Yes, I
Yes,
see that.
yes. And don't you see the dog wagging its tail? All right. So I think, Ruben, I think there's something wrong with your computer. You might want to like really check it because these things are moving in the background, and
he
apparently
says
everybody else is seeing them, but you're not seeing them.
he says Joe Rayo, Ruben Fairchild says Joe Rayo needs a winter background. Why doesn't Rayo put up some props? You know what, Ruben Fairchild? My props My props are
Ah!
what you see behind you. All of these awards that I got during my broadcasting career, including the 8 Emmy nominations, those are my props. When you get your own show, you can put up whatever prop that you want. Okay?
Don't you
Very
love the fact, Joe, that all the guys that we used to think were old curmudgeons when we were younger, and now we're them.
good.
All right. That's it for tonight. I'm going fishing tomorrow morning, and I'm sure it's going to be in the teens when I get on the boat at 7 o'clock. So,
Good,
call me crazy, but I got my fishing buddies down here, and we're going fishing. So, everybody, we'll see you tomorrow night at 7:35 p.m. Night, night.
good night, folks.